Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokemon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now, there's not a huge amount of news this week. There is one little piece of news, and that is that the art for Worlds this year has been unveiled, if you will. If you go onto PokemonWorldChampionships.com or just Google Pokemon World Championships, the official site for this year is now live, and as nobody should be surprised about, if you go on there, you'll see the art. If you want to find like a good version of it, just flick onto the wallpapers part of the site and you'll see it there. And it's surprisingly enough centered around forests, and it's got the usual mix of kind of Pokemon you might not be expecting, like Braviary and all that. It looks kind of cool. Last year we had it centered around the free monkeys. This year there doesn't seem to be a kind of small set of Pokemon per se, like you had with that one. But, I mean, the artwork looks cool. The artwork looks cool every single year, to be honest. There's also some totem pole action going on. So head yourself over to there and have a look. For those of you going to Worlds, it should be making you far more excited about Worlds this year. And for those of you sad people like me who are sad because they can't go out to Worlds this year, all it's going to do is make you wish you could go out. So if you're not going out, quite frankly, maybe don't go look at it. Now that's pretty much it in terms of new news this week. Not a huge amount has been happening, but I'm just going to take a minute to fill you in on PTCG Radio stuff. First of all, although I'm not going to Worlds this year, I am going on holiday. I'm going to Spain for a fortnight. So what's going to happen is that next week you will have an early PTCG Radio dropping on Monday or Tuesday, and that's going to be my pre-Worlds podcast. Decks that I think are viable, what you should play, what you should look out for, a brief analysis of all the decks and all of that, plus other things to do and look out for at Worlds. It's going to be a good one, and if you're going to Worlds, you definitely want to listen to that one. After that, and I don't do this often at all, I think the last time was several months ago when I had big technical difficulties, but I will be taking a week off. In 2 weeks' time, there will be no PTCG Radio, because I'm going to be in Spain, on a beach, exploring a new city, embarrassing myself trying to speak Spanish, lazing in the pool, something of that nature. And then in 3 weeks' time, I will be back with my post-World show, where I will be going over what won Worlds, what did well, how the last chance qualifier went, everything you could possibly want to know about Worlds. Although I'm not going there personally, I have a lot of friends going, and do rest assured that anything that's worth knowing, I'll pick up from them and I will pass on. The other thing is, if you haven't already, please go check out my YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for PTCG Radio. You'll find a bunch of stuff on there, mostly at the moment PTCGO videos. There's a few on there with Quad Snorlax, with Flareon, with Darkrai and with Rails. In the near future there should be more Snorlax and Flareon going up, and I'm in the middle of trying to put together a Beedrill deck, so if I can get any good games recorded with that, I'll stick them up there as well. If it's not up there already, then in the very near future there'll be a pretty fun game I played with Darkrai Hammers against a old school Durant deck, so have a look at that to see if Durant can still cut it. For the next week or two, or 3 to be honest, while I'm off jetting around to Spain and at home with my family and all kinds of commitments, videos might be going up slightly less often, but certainly from when I come back from holiday, I'll have a lot more time and I'm going to be hitting it. You're also going to see some live games going up there in the near future. I'm having my first judging experience straight after Worlds at a Plasma Blast pre-release, so hopefully I'll be able to get some live games recorded there and upload them. And similarly, in the very near future, you should be seeing the first part of my documentary I'll be making with my little brother. A little kind of introductory interview should be going up in the near future. That should be absolutely brilliant, so do keep your eyes peeled for that. Now this week, Worlds is a bit too far away. There is only one thing worth talking about this week, and that is the rotation. Now, just before we start off, there is the extra kind of set of tournaments we've been told about, which are going to be black and white on, starting presumably after Worlds next year. We don't know if they're going to be run as well as at the same venue as Modified, or as an alternative to Modified, nor do we know any real details, whether it's like Japan's Palace format where certain cards are restricted or banned. So we're going to leave all of that. I'm not going to tell you anything about that because, to be honest, I don't know what to tell you at the moment. What we're going to be focusing on today is the rotation to Next Destinies-On, which is going to be happening straight after Worlds this year, and the format in which you are going to be conducting all of your battle roads, assuming, of course, battle roads are happening. So, it's rotating to Next Destinies-On, and to be honest with you, we're not actually losing a huge amount. I made a big list of all the things I thought we were losing, and then I went back and had a look at reprints, etc., and it turns out we're not losing much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of the cards that we're losing, but this does not count certain things. Any cards that have been reprinted in later sets, like Professor Juniper, like N, like Zekrom and Reshiram, I may mention that they've been reprinted, I may not mention them at all, but the point is they don't count, they've been reprinted. Anything that's been reprinted as a secret rare, and I'm looking at things like Rocky Helmet, like Max Potion, and like Pokemon Catcher, will not be rotated, because what basically the way it basically works, for those of you that don't know, is that anything which is legal in some form is legal in all forms. So, for instance, Emerging Powers is being rotated out. That means that Emerging Powers Pokemon Catcher would be rotating out. But in a later set, Pokemon Catcher was reprinted as a secret rare. Now, that doesn't mean that only the secret rare Pokemon Catcher is illegal. It means that all Pokemon Catchers, including the quote, rotated out Pokemon Catchers, will also be legal. Things like Gust of Wind with a different name still remain illegal. Now, there is a chance that some of these cards will very soon be making a comeback. Now, when they're making a comeback, or potentially making a comeback, I will let you know about it. I cannot say for certain whether they will or will not be making a comeback. All I can do is give you some information about whether we think they will or will not be making a comeback. That is, quite frankly, the best I can do. Now, we're only actually losing 3 sets here. We are losing Black and White, Emerging Powers, and Noble Victories. We are also losing all of the promotional cards from Black and White 1 to Black and White 32. So as we go through, I will just kind of fill you in on those ones as well. No huge losses there, but one thing which is very interesting, you'll notice that the original Tropical Beach from 2011 would have been rotated out, but it's actually ended up being saved by virtue of it being reprinted as last year's Worlds promo. So whether you like Tropical Beach or not will depend on, whether you like this or not. But regardless, it would have been rotated out, but it's been saved. Now, just before I start going down the list, I would like to remind you all that I am not perfect or infallible. I may miss one or two things here or there. So if I do miss anything, hit me up on Twitter at @TheWassy, or find me on email at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or if you're listening to this on YouTube, just stick a little comment down below and I will, include it next week as an apology. So looking down the list of promos, we're losing promos 1 to 32, and to be honest, looking through there's only one card I can see that we're really losing, and that is the promotional Litwick that came in the free pack blisters. This was a Litwick with Call for Family. It was nominally the best Litwick. Having said that, Chandeler's not been seeing a huge amount of play, and if it did see play, then it's likely to be seeing play as, using Lileep to bring it up as a Stage 2. But I'm going to be talking more about that in the near future. There are a couple of playable Chandelers, including one which was saved by virtue of it being a secret rare. So, moving into Black and White, we're actually losing very, very little indeed. We're losing the foul play Zoroark. Now, this saw a little bit of play here and there. It was a cool little attacker that could attack for a double colourless, but that was about it. It's not amazing, but it was alright. It saw a little bit of play here and there. It had some creative uses. That is unfortunately going. It was a promo, but I believe the promo is being rotated out as well. Now, one of the big things we're losing is the Black and White Klinklang. This is the Shift Gear Klinklang that allowed you to move all the energy around. The Klinklang which actually won US Nationals last year and has been an integral part of the Klinklang deck, which has been winning quite a lot this year. And I'll talk about how the Klinklang deck's affected a little bit later. The other thing we're losing from Black and White is the Retaliate Bouffalont. This was a Bouffalont that for a double colours could do a load of damage, assuming that you had a Pokemon knocked out the previous turn. This again saw play more when we rotated to Heart Gold Soul Silver on. It saw a little bit of play for a while in a kind of like a Stage 1's deck, although it wasn't a Stage 1, I see that. Hasn't been seen a bunch of play for a while, was used as an occasional tech here and there, in things like Eels. It's alright, it wasn't amazing, we've lost it. However, that Bouffalon has been recently reprinted in Japan in EX Battle Boost, so if we get those cards, we may be seeing a reprint of it. What we haven't lost from Black and White is the M-Ball, which with Inferno Fandango, that lets you attach all those fire energies because it's been a secret rare. The Reshiram and Zekrom, the Outrage ones, because they were reprinted in Next Destinies. We haven't lost Potion because it came back in Boundaries Crossed, and we haven't lost Juniper because it came back in Dark Explorers. What we have lost from Black and White is quite a few, I would say, fairly important trainers. So, deep breath. We have lost Energy Switch. This isn't going to kill Darkrai, but it's going to hurt Darkrai. Darkrai at the moment, it was brilliant because you could Dark Patch an Energy Switch, or you could attach to a Sableye turn 1, and then turn 2 you could free retreat with Darkrai, Energy Switch it onto something else, and you haven't wasted an energy attachment. It's going to make turn 2 Darkrai considerably harder to get, and it's even going to make turn 2 Absol considerably harder to get. The fact that you can now run with a deck focusing on a 2 energy Absol rather than a 3 energy Darkrai will help, but having said that, it's still far from ideal. This will hurt Darkrai. We're going to be losing Plus Power, which again, for a time, really did shine. It's been overshadowed by Hypnotoxic Laser, with Virizion coming out, which has an ability which blocks all special conditions, including Hypnotoxic Laser's Poison and Sleep. Then, and obviously blocking the poison means it doesn't do anything, which for some decks would make Plus Power possibly a better choice, because people have always wanted to play cards which increase the number of damage. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to use Plus Power anymore. We're also losing Super Scoop Up, which again was a card that's seen a lot of play but fallen out of favour. Some early Blastoise lists focused around Super Scoop Up, but now with people running so many energy retrieval cards, including superior energy retrieval, people were generally starting to go with Max Potion instead. You could just get the energy back, and it was not reliant on a coin flip. Speaking of superior energy retrieval and energy retrieval, we are losing energy retrieval, which, again, is not a staple. We've got superior energy retrieval, but the thing is, when you get end down to 1, you can't use superior energy retrieval because you need to discard 2 cards to actually use it. Similarly, there are some situations when you don't want to discard things from your hand, so energy retrieval has been seeing a bit of play as a one-off. Certainly, I believe it was Raul Reddy who went 9-0 at US Nationals with Blastoise in the Swiss round, played 1 energy retrieval, and he claims that it won him at least a couple of games. Now, one thing to note is that along with Megalo Cannon in Japan, a Blastoise Kyurem half deck was released, which did include a reprint of energy retrieval. And that brings me to an important point here. All of these trainers are quite possibly going to be reprinted in Megalo Cannon. We have often had, most recently in Boundaries Crossed, we have often had trainer cards reprinted, and not necessarily at the same time as Japan gets them, not even necessarily with new artwork. Again, I refer you to Boundaries Crossed, where we got exact black and white reprints of things like Potion and Switch. So, although they are being rotated out, this rotation is going to come into effect as Megalo Cannon comes out, and these cards may be reprinted in Megalo Cannon. I'm discussing them today because I don't know whether they will be, and I want you to be fully prepared. But obviously, if Energy Retrieval or Energy Switch get reprinted in Megalo Cannon, then you can ignore everything I've said about them going. I'm glad we're cool with that. The only other thing we're losing from Black and White is Revive, the card which allows you to take a Pokemon from your discard pile and put it on your bench. Again, it's not a card that's seen a huge amount of play, and we generally see Super Rod being used instead, but something to bear in mind, we aren't going to have it anymore. Moving into Emerging Powers, and again, there's not a huge amount we're losing. We're not losing Max Potion, Pokemon Catcher, or the Damage Swap Reuniclus, because all 3 of them have been reprinted as secret rares. Now, the Damage Swap Reuniclus hasn't really seen play since the Truth was being used after World 2 years ago. But, again, with that Cradley coming out, which allows you to put Stage 2s onto your bench as basic Pokemon, or as if they were basic Pokemon, maybe something like Reuniclus could come back, and it's still going to be there. We're losing a couple of Pokemon, but nothing hugely important. We are losing the Virizion, Cobalion and Terrakion from emerging powers. Now, I don't really like the Terrakion and the Cobalion, I never have done, although the Terrakion did see a little bit of play in CMT at World last year. The reason was it did a flat 100 and it took 3 energy, including 2 fighting, but it did a flat 100 and that allowed you to KO a Darkrai even with Eviolite attached. Nowadays, Darkrai's not quite as good as it used to be, certainly not as overpowering as it used to be. It doesn't tend to play Eviolite very often, and we don't have Shaman to just swap all your energy around. So to be honest, this was much less relevant. I did like the Virizion, which again had a 100 damage Secret Sword for 2 grass and a colourless. I did like the look of that as maybe a one-off tech in a Virizion Genesect list, which I'll be talking about in the near future, that deck. But we're not going to have it. Something to note while we're here, the Noble Victories Virizion, which has the dual draw attack and the 40 for 2 energy, which goes up to 80 the following turn. That will remain legal because it's being reprinted as a secret rare in Megalocanon. But we're losing the one with Secret Sword. Whether that's a big deal to you, I'll leave that up to you. We're also losing the Thunderous and Tornadus. Now these are again cards who are far past their prime. The Tornadus was a staple card for a long time in CMT last season, although even at Worlds last year before Celebi all rotated out, it was stopping to see play. Personally, in the deck that I ran at Worlds last year, I didn't run a single Emerging Powers Tornadus. I didn't like having to put free energy on it. It wasn't for me. Again, the Thunderous in the Eels list saw a little bit of play, but it's massively fallen out of favour. The other Pokemon we would be losing from Emerging Powers is Gothitelle, which would kill the Gothitelle Excelgor deck completely dead. But the good news is that, just like the Bufalon, it is being reprinted in EX Battle Boost. I think there is a very good chance we are going to see the reprint of this Gothitelle. So I wouldn't be too upset about Excelgor yet. I believe Excelgor, we are going to be getting that reprint. If we don't get the reprint, it's going to be a huge loss to the format. Unless, of course, you hate that deck. But I think we're going to be getting the reprint. Now, I had a chat with my good friend Tommy Roberts about this, and, my point was, it's not really going to matter either way. Virizion coming out blocking blocking special conditions, is going to make Gothitelle Excelgor much, much, much weaker. Darkrai Hydreigon might be seeing a comeback with Virizion. Similarly, you're just going to have Genesect Virizion, where you're not going to be able to paralyze or poison them with Excelgor. But as Tommy said, having Gothitelle in the format, being able to block trainer cards, it's a good deck that's going to allow creative deck builders to do something with. It's a good thing that it's in the format, and I'm actually inclined to agree with him. I also spoke to a couple of my friends who have played in Japan recently, and what they told me was, very simply, they saw a Virizion Genesect come incredibly close to losing to a Gothitelle. So don't take anything for granted. We're losing a couple of trainers from Emerging Powers. We're losing Recycle and Crushing Hammer. Crushing Hammer, I am devastated to lose, but again, it may well be reprinted, and energy removal cards have been in the format for quite some time. And Crushing Hammer, I really like, because for things like Virizion Genesect, one of the things I think can really stand up to that is going to be Darkrai Hammers. Get rid of the Plasma Energy with Enhanced Hammer, which will be staying in the format, and then get rid of the Grass Energy with Crushing Hammer, and then if they really want to be using Genesect's attack, which discards 2 energy to do a 200, they're really going to be risking running out of energy. Yeah, they get 2 prizes off your Darkrai, but they're running out of energy. Now, I'm going to be talking about Virizion Genesect in huge detail straight after Worlds. Probably, I'm going to have my post-Worlds podcast, then we'll probably do a Megalocanon, and then the next one after that will probably be Virizion Genesect. So in a few weeks' time, we'll be talking all about that deck. But the point is, Crushing Hammer, it was a good card that had some creative uses, and I'm sad to see it go. Another card I'm really sad to see go is Recycle, the card that allows you to flip a coin, if heads, put something from your discard pile back on top of your deck. Now, this saw play with Snorlax, Quad Snorlax. And again, if you want to see Quad Snorlax in action, please head yourself over to my YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search PTCGO, and you'll find it. You can see a couple of games I play with Quad Snorlax. And this allowed you to get back things like Pokemon catchers or hypnotic lasers, etc. But it also saw play in silly decks like Flareon, for instance. And again, you can go and see this by checking out the Flareon games on my channel. Although check out the first Flareon game, so I took Recycle out for the second game. And what this allows you to do, it can be paired with something like Life Dew. Now, the Flareon deck involves basically killing your own Cofagrigus and letting your Pokemon die, so you get lots of Pokemon in a discard. Life Dew is a brilliant A-Spec trainer card that stops your opponent taking a prize if they KO a Pokemon with Life Dew. And what was brilliant about it was that you lose a Pokemon with Life Dew, they don't take a prize card, and if you can hit heads on Recycle, you can then reuse that Life Dew. Recycle, makes me sad, quite frankly, that we're losing it. But again, it's been reprinted before. This wasn't the first time we saw Recycle. We may well get it back. And moving into the last the last set we're going to lose, Noble Victories. Now again, we are not losing the Virizion or the Terrakion from this set because they've been reprinted as secret rares. We're not losing the Archeops or the Chandelure for the same reason. Eviolite was reprinted with very slightly different art in Boundaries Crossed. N was reprinted in Dark Explorers. All the fossils are being reprinted in Megalocanon. Rocky Helmet has come back as a secret rare. And Super Rod was in Dragon Vault. So, Dragon Vault's not being rotated. So all of those cards we are keeping. But I suppose of all of them, of all the sets, Noble Victories is giving us the biggest losses. Now, we're losing a Seismitoad with Round, which I know Round was never a great deck. Tom Hall managed to win a Battle Road with it, as I mentioned last week, so props to Tom Hall. But still, it was a fun little deck you could play around with. What's even sadder about this is that we never actually got the Meloetta EX with Round. Now, I don't know if this ever would have worked, but it would have been fun to have a basic with Round, so you could have put up a Seismitoad for a double colourless and been one-hit KOing EXs by just peppering down other Seismitoads or Palpitoads and chucking a few Meloetta EXs on the bench. Yeah, Meloetta EX had, I think, 110 HP and was an EX, but if they're knocking out Meloetta EX on the bench, yeah, they're getting 2 prizes, but you can then knock out an EX, and you're getting 2 prizes, but they're not knocking out your attackers, you are knocking out their attackers. That deck probably wouldn't have been viable, it probably wouldn't have been any good. But we're never actually going to get the chance to see now, because Seismitoad's being rotated out before we ever got the Meloetta EX with Round. It's sad, but what can you do? We're also losing the Double Freeze Vanillux, which, I mean, nobody's really going to miss this, but, you know, people like Matt Blower managed to get 3rd place, or at least top 4, at UK Nats last year with Vanillux, when everyone had written it off. A very good friend of mine, I made her a Vanillux deck with Double Freeze that she used to play at League. It was a fantastic little Pokemon, and it's gone. It was the one where, with a, you flipped 2 coins, it did 40 for the damage times number of heads, but if you got 1 heads, they were paralysed, 75% chance of paralysis. But that comboed well with another card from Noble Victories, which were also losing, the Victory Star Victini, which basically said that if an attack has coin flips in, you can use Victory Star to reflip those coins, which actually ended up giving you something like a 93.5% chance of paralysis, which is how Matt Blower managed to get 3rd at UK Nationals. There was a Vileplume at the time, which locked trainers from the bench, which meant you couldn't even use Switch to get out of it. It was a wonderful, wonderful little combo. But it's gone. The Victini was reprinted as a promo, but I'm afraid it was a promo with a number less than 33, so it's gone. The other losses, I think, are even bigger. We're losing the Kyurem from Noble Victories that had Glaciate for 2 water and a colourless, which did 30 to all the bench, and it had the Outrage attack. Again, it hasn't seen play for quite some time, but I took 4th place at a Battle Roads with this just before Nationals last year, and I loved it. It wasn't the best card ever, but gosh darn, I loved it. And we're also losing a Cobalion from the same set, the exact same Cobalion that I took to Nationals this year. Now I know I bombed out, but my deck beat Darkrai and it beat Plasma. The reason I mention that's not just to be big-headed, it's because this Noble Victories Cobalion, for my money, was the best counter we had to Kyurem from the Plasma set. And I know we've still got Cobalion EX, but he's an EX and he needs a laser to 2 here. And I like Noble Victories Cobalion, but he's gone. The Terrakion and Virizion are staying around because they were reprinted, but I'm afraid the Cobalion never was. He dared. Gutted. But Noble Victories brings us the biggest loss that we are actually going to get from this rotation, and that is Electric. Now, some of you won't be sad to see Electric go. I personally will be. I think, and I was going to talk about this when we talked about Virizion Genesect, I think Eels was perfectly poised to be really, really good next year. The reason why I thought it was going to be really, really good is because we could have had the V-Create Victini, which would have very, very nicely fit into Eels decks, which in the same way that it countered Klinklang brilliantly, it would also have brilliantly countered a Virizion Genesect. Not only that, but it's still good against Blastoise, which is going to be staying around. I just think it would have been a really, really cool thing to do. I think it would have been really, really fun. And we're losing it. We are, as it happens, also losing V-Create Victini, so I suppose it's not the worst thing, but it's still... Had we kept V-Create Victini and had we kept Eels, then we would have had a really, really fragile deck, Rayquaza Electric, with a potentially bad matchup against things like Plasma, but it would have been a really good counter to Blastoise, to Virizion Genesect, and to Klinklang. I think it would have been really, really good. But regardless, we're losing it. No point crying over spilt milk now. So they're the big losses. So I'm going to finish today just by looking at how this is actually going to affect the format. And I'll be nice and quick with this. The decks we've lost are Gothitelle and any Electric decks. Electric, I told you a couple of weeks ago about the Zekrom Bouffalant Electric deck, which managed to win Dutch Nationals. That's dead, as is Rayquaza Electric, a deck which, I know I'm saying this a few times today, but go check out my YouTube channel, because there's a couple of really cool games I played with Electric on there. And, quite frankly, it's a shame I'm never going to get to play it in a tournament, because I really like Rayquaza Electric. But that's gone. Because we don't have Electric, it kills the deck. The other deck we're losing is Gothitelle Excelgor, because we are losing Gothitelle. However, do remember that's been reprinted in Japan, we may get the reprint over here. Decks which are severely hampered with this rotation are Darkrai, assuming we don't get an Energy Switch reprint, and I really hope we do, because again, Darkrai hammers, it's going to have a bad Blastoise matchup, but it's going to have a good Virizion Genesect and a good Plasma matchup, so actually, I think it would be a good thing there to balance the format and make it something other than Blastoise, Virizion Genesect, Plasma. But again, I'll talk loads about the format and what it's going to look like as we get through Worlds and through the release of Megalo Cannon. The other two decks which are going to be severely hampered are thirdly Quad Snorlax, and I know this was never a perfect deck, but without Recycle, it's going to be really, really hampered. Now, one could argue that in the same way that Virizion Genesect, or Virizion in general, could have killed Gothitelle Excelgor, it could kill Quad Snorlax, because all it really does is revolve around lasers anyway. I like Quad Snorlax, and I'm currently going to be I'm in the middle of writing a 6 prizes article, which I'm going to stick up hopefully in the next few days. It's partly there to promote my YouTube channel. If you haven't got that hint already, I want you to go and check it out. But also, I've been playing around with a minimal energy, rather than no energy Quad Snorlax, just for decks that you can't beat using laser alone. Probably not going to be amazing, but it's a fun little deck to mess around with. If I can get it working, I might stick a few videos up on the YouTube channel showcasing how it works. But to all intents and purposes, Quad Snorlax needs a card like Recycle to keep getting those lasers back. It also needed Crushing Hammer, I would argue. So losing those two cards is going to severely hamper it. And another deck which I've put it down as severely hampered, but when I say severely hampered, I mean severely hampered, is Kling Clang. It's losing the shift gear Kling Clang. It's not losing Plasma Clang, it can still block EXs. What it can no longer do is block EXs and then heal with Max Potion, moving the energy. Now, you can still block the EXs, but you can't move the energy Max Potion, move it back like you used to be able to, and that is really going to kill the deck. The other thing is you're losing Noble Victory's Cobalion. Now, most people are only playing one copy of this in the deck anyway, but quite frankly, it was a really big part of the deck. It allowed you to one-hit Plasma Kyurem, it allowed you to punish Blastoise players who put loads of energy on their Blastoise to try and kill you, etc, etc. I fear for Kling Clang. I think it's going to be really, really hampered. The decks that it really doesn't bother at all are Plasma, that doesn't really lose anything. Blastoise, it loses energy retrieval, assuming we don't get the reprint, but even with that, superior energy retrieval will pick up the slack. And the Garbodor decks, we're not losing any important tools, we're not losing Garbodor, so quite frankly, they're still as they were. But I'll talk about the format in more detail later on. So, I've actually managed to keep it to about half an hour this week, which is very rare for me, so enjoy the slightly shorter podcast. I hope I've run you through all of the important things from this rotation. The list I made initially when this rotation came out has gotten a hell of a lot shorter since I've realised how many things have actually been reprinted as secret rares or in future sets. Now, I know I did make a couple of little boo-boos last week, like saying Reshiram and Zekrom were going to be rotated when they weren't because of the Noble Victory, Next Destinies reprints, but again, you know, I recall these things with the information I've got at the time. Occasionally there will be mistakes. Don't hold it against me too much. I think the information in this is all up to date, but again, get in touch with me if it's not. And I hope I've got you thinking, for those of you not going to Worlds at least, thinking about the format next season. I'm going to give you a little hint that Virizion Genesect is going to be big, and Darkrai Hydreigon will be making a comeback, but I'm going to talk more about them in the coming weeks. Next week, we're getting our pre-World show, and then it's going to be 2 weeks, I'm going to take a week off, and we're going to be getting our post-World show. So look forward to all of that. I love hearing from you. I'm a lonely man, so do get in touch with me in all the usual ways. Tweet me at @TheWassy, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or if you're listening on YouTube, just leave a little comment below, and I will get back to you. Thank you for listening, as always. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.